Emma Catherine Whitmore stood 6 feet and 2 inches tall in her bare feet, and at 24 years old, she had grown tired of apologizing for taking up space in the world. Living in the small town of Cedar Falls, Montana, population 3,847, her height made her a spectacle wherever she went. The grocery store clerks would crane their necks to look up at her. Children would point and whisper, and worst of all, the town's self-appointed social committee, led by the insufferable Marjorie Hendricks, never missed an opportunity to remind Emma that she was, in their words, unmarriageable material. "No man wants to look up at his wife," Marjorie would say with a saccharine smile during their weekly encounters at Henderson's General Store. "It goes against the natural order of things, dear. Perhaps you should consider moving to one of those big cities where they have more unusual people." Emma worked as a librarian at the Cedar Falls Public Library, a job that suited her quiet nature and love of books. The library was her sanctuary, filled with tall shelves that finally made her feel proportional to her surroundings. She had inherited the position from old Mrs. Carmichael, who had specifically requested that Emma take over because, as she put it, "You're the only person in this town who can reach the top shelves without a ladder." The library was a modest building constructed in 1962, with oak shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling and large windows that let in the afternoon light. Emma had spent 3 years organizing the collection, creating reading programs for local children, and maintaining the historical archives that documented Cedar Falls' founding in 1889. It was honest work that paid modestly, but allowed her to live independently in a small apartment above Murphy's Bakery on Main Street. Emma's daily routine was predictable and comforting. She would wake at 6:30, brew coffee in her tiny kitchen, and walk the 4 blocks to work. The library opened at 9, and she would spend her mornings shelving returns, helping patrons find books, and managing the single computer that provided internet access to the community. Afternoons were reserved for administrative tasks, cataloging new acquisitions, and preparing for the children's story time that she hosted every Thursday evening. It was during one of these Thursday evening sessions that she first encountered the source of her upcoming troubles. Mayor Ronald Hutchinson had begun attending the library regularly, though Emma suspected his interest lay not in literature, but in the building itself. He would arrive during her story time, ostensibly to observe the community programming, but Emma noticed how his eyes surveyed the space with the calculating gaze of a businessman rather than the appreciation of a book lover. Mayor Hutchinson was a short, round man with thinning hair and a tendency to wear suits that were slightly too small for his expanding waistline. He had been elected to his position 3 years earlier on a platform of modernizing Cedar Falls for the 21st century, which translated to bringing in chain businesses and developing the downtown area. He owned Hutchinson Real Estate, the largest property development company in the county, and had made his fortune buying up small-town properties and converting them into profitable ventures. "Miss Whitmore," he said one Thursday evening after the children had left, "I've been thinking about this building. It's quite large for a library, isn't it? Especially considering how few people actually use it." Emma looked around at the evidence of the library's daily use: the worn carpets, the chairs that had been moved by patrons, the circulation desk stacked with returned books. "We serve about 60 patrons daily, Mayor Hutchinson. That's nearly 2% of the town's population using the library every day." "Yes, but think about what else this space could become," he continued, his voice taking on the tone of a sales pitch. "A coffee shop, perhaps, or a boutique hotel for tourists passing through. The location is prime, right on Main Street, plenty of parking, historical character. This building could be generating real revenue for the town instead of just storing books." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "The library is a public service, Mayor. It's not supposed to generate revenue. It's supposed to serve the community." Of course," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "But we need to think practically. The town budget is tight, and we need to make every dollar count. I'm not saying we should close the library immediately, but perhaps we could find it a smaller, more appropriate space. Maybe that old storage room behind the fire station." The storage room behind the fire station was a windowless concrete box that had been used to store road salt and broken equipment. Emma had seen it once during a town meeting, and the idea of relocating the library there was absurd. There would be no room for the historical archives, no space for programming, and certainly no accommodation for the thousands of books that currently filled the oak shelves. "Mayor Hutchinson," Emma said, choosing her words carefully, "this library has served Cedar Falls for over 60 years. It's listed in the historical registry, and it houses irreplaceable documents about our town's history. Moving it to a storage room would effectively destroy everything we've built here." Now, Miss Whitmore," he said with a condescending smile, "I understand you're attached to this place, but sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the greater good. I'm sure you could find another job easily enough. A woman of your stature might be better suited to physical labor anyway, maybe construction or farming." Emma's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The casual cruelty of his suggestion, the implication that her height made her unsuitable for intellectual work, was exactly the kind of prejudice she had faced her entire life. But she forced herself to remain professional. "I'll need to see any official proposals in writing, Mayor. And any changes to the library would need to be approved by the town council and the state library board." "Oh, I'm sure we can work something out," he said, heading toward the door. Small towns like Cedar Falls need to be flexible. We can't let bureaucracy stand in the way of progress. After he left, Emma stood alone in the library, surrounded by the books that had been her companions and her livelihood. She walked to the history section and pulled out a thick volume titled Cedar Falls, A Century of Growth. The book contained photographs of the town's founding families, documentation of the lumber industry that had built the local economy, and stories of the hardy people who had carved a community out of the Montana wilderness. She turned to a chapter about the library's construction in 1962. The building had been funded by a combination of federal grants, state funding, and local donations. The oak shelves had been built by local craftsmen, and the building had been designed to last for generations. It was more than just a repository for books. It was a monument to the town's commitment to education and culture. Emma realized that Mayor Hutchinson's interest in the library was not about modernization or efficiency. It was about money. The building sat on one of the most valuable lots in town, and converting it to commercial use would generate significant revenue, both for the town and for whoever developed the property. She suspected that Hutchinson Real Estate would be involved in any redevelopment, creating a clear conflict of interest that the mayor seemed unconcerned about addressing. That evening, Emma climbed the stairs to her small apartment and sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad. She began making a list of everyone she could contact for help: the State Library Board, the Historical Society, the town council members who might support the library, and local residents who used the services regularly. She also made note of the legal protections that might apply to the building, including its historical designation and the terms of the original grants that had funded its construction. As she worked, Emma felt a familiar mix of determination and resignation. She had spent her entire life being told that she didn't fit, that she was too tall, too independent, too much. But the library had been the one place where her height was an asset, where her intelligence was valued, and where she could serve her community in a meaningful way. She would not let Mayor Hutchinson take that away without a fight. The next morning, Emma arrived at work early and began making phone calls. The State Library Board was sympathetic, but explained that local municipalities had significant autonomy in managing their facilities. The Historical Society was outraged, but acknowledged that their influence was limited. Town council members were divided, with some supporting the mayor's vision of modernization and others recognizing the library's value to the community. As the day progressed, Emma realized that her fight to save the library would be more difficult than she had anticipated. Mayor Hutchinson had been building support for his redevelopment plans for months, and he had the backing of several influential business owners who saw the library as an underutilized asset. Emma, on the other hand, was a single woman with no political connections, and no financial resources to mount a serious campaign. But she also understood that this battle was about more than just the library. It was about the kind of community Cedar Falls wanted to be, one that valued education and culture, or one that prioritized profit above all else. Emma had spent her life being underestimated because of her height, but she was determined to prove that being different could be a strength rather than a weakness. The first official notice arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail to the library's address. Emma signed for the thick envelope with trembling hands, already knowing what it contained. The letterhead read, Office of the Mayor, Cedar Falls, Montana, and the document inside was titled Proposal for Municipal Property Redevelopment, Cedar Falls Public Library. Emma read through the proposal twice, her anger growing with each paragraph. The document outlined a plan to relocate the library to a more suitable facility and convert the current building into a mixed-use commercial space featuring a coffee shop, gift store, and boutique hotel. The proposal claimed that the change would increase property values, create jobs, and attract tourism revenue to our community. The timeline was aggressive. The library would be closed by the end of June, giving Emma just 4 months to pack up 60 years of accumulated books, documents, and materials. The proposed new location was indeed the storage room behind the fire station, which the proposal optimistically described as a cozy, intimate space perfect for a small-town library. Emma immediately called the mayor's office to request a meeting. His secretary, a woman named Dolores Patterson, who had been with the city for 20 years, was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitmore, but Mayor Hutchinson is very busy this week. He's meeting with potential investors for the downtown redevelopment project. Perhaps you could put your concerns in writing." "Dolores, this is about closing the library. Surely the mayor can spare 15 minutes to discuss this with the librarian." "I understand your frustration, dear, but the mayor's schedule is completely booked. He did mention that if you have questions about the proposal, you should contact the town council. They'll be voting on it at next month's meeting." Emma hung up the phone and stared at the proposal again. The town council meeting was scheduled for April 15th, giving her just over a month to mount a defense. She had never been involved in local politics, but she understood that she would need to mobilize community support if she had any hope of defeating the mayor's plan. That afternoon, Emma posted a notice on the library's bulletin board announcing a community meeting to discuss the proposed closure. She also sent flyers to every household in town, using the library's limited budget to pay for printing and postage. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening, and Emma spent the week preparing her presentation. She gathered statistics about library usage, documented the services that would be lost if the library closed, and researched the legal requirements for disposing of public property. She also reached out to other small-town librarians across Montana, seeking advice and support from colleagues who had faced similar challenges. The response was both encouraging and sobering. Several librarians had successfully fought closure attempts, but others had lost their battles to budget cuts and redevelopment plans. The key, they told her, was to demonstrate the library's value to the community and to identify allies who could speak on her behalf. Thursday evening arrived with a late spring snowstorm that Emma feared would keep people away from the meeting. But by 7 o'clock, nearly 50 residents had gathered in the library's main room, filling every chair and standing along the walls. Emma recognized many faces, regular patrons, parents of children who attended story time, and elderly residents who used the library's computer for email and internet access. Emma stood at the front of the room, her height finally an advantage as she addressed the crowd without needing a microphone. She outlined the mayor's proposal and explained what the closure would mean for the community. She talked about the children's programs that would disappear, the historical archives that would be lost, and the quiet space that many residents relied on for study and reflection. "This library is more than just a building," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "It's the heart of our community's intellectual and cultural life. It's where children discover the joy of reading, where students research their school projects, and where we preserve the history of Cedar Falls for future generations." The response was immediate and passionate. Sarah Mitchell, a young mother with 3 children, stood up to speak. "My kids love story time. It's the highlight of their week. Where else in this town can they participate in educational programming for free?" Harold Kowalski, a retired teacher, raised his hand. "I've been researching my family's genealogy using the historical archives. Those documents can't be replaced if they're lost or damaged in a move to some storage room." One by one, residents shared their stories about how the library had touched their lives. Emma felt a surge of hope as she listened to their testimonials, but she also noticed who was absent from the meeting. Mayor Hutchinson hadn't attended, nor had any of the town council members or the business owners who supported the redevelopment plan. As the meeting concluded, Emma asked for volunteers to help with the campaign to save the library. 15 people signed up immediately, offering to make phone calls, write letters, and attend the town council meeting. Emma felt grateful for their support, but she also understood that they were facing a formidable opponent. The next morning, Emma's optimism was shattered when she arrived at work to find Mayor Hutchinson waiting outside the library with a man she didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and thin, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. His hair was perfectly styled, and his shoes were polished to a high shine. "Miss Whitmore," Mayor Hutchinson said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I'd like you to meet Bradley Ashford from Ashford Development Corporation. Bradley is interested in purchasing the library building once the town council approves our proposal." Emma unlocked the library door and turned to face the two men. "Mr. Ashford, I assume you're aware that this building is currently operating as a public library and serves hundreds of residents every month." Bradley Ashford extended his hand, which Emma reluctantly shook. His grip was firm and confident, the handshake of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Of course, Miss Whitmore, and I commend you for your service to the community, but sometimes progress requires difficult decisions. I'm sure you understand." "What I understand," Emma replied, "is that this building is protected by state law as a public facility. Any sale would require extensive legal review and community approval." Mayor Hutchinson laughed, a sound that grated on Emma's nerves. "Now, Miss Whitmore, let's not overcomplicate things. The town council has the authority to dispose of municipal property as they see fit, and I'm confident they'll make the right decision for Cedar Falls' future." Bradley Ashford walked through the library, examining the oak shelves and original hardwood floors with the eye of a developer. "This is a beautiful building," he said. "The bones are solid and the location is perfect. With some renovations, this could be a stunning boutique hotel. I'm thinking exposed brick, modern fixtures, maybe a wine bar where the circulation desk is currently located." Emma watched in horror as he described his vision for gutting the building's interior. The oak shelves that had been handcrafted by local artisans would be torn out. The reading nooks would be converted to hotel rooms, and the quiet atmosphere that had made the library a sanctuary would be destroyed forever. "Of course," Bradley continued, "we'd need to move quickly once the sale is approved. Demolition and renovation would begin immediately to have the hotel operational by tourist season." "Demolition?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, selective demolition," Bradley clarified. "We'd preserve the exterior character, but the interior would need to be completely reimagined. You can't run a profitable hotel with all these books everywhere." After the two men left, Emma sat alone in the library, surrounded by the books and the life she had built over 3 years. She realized that her fight to save the library was not just about preserving a public service. It was about protecting the soul of Cedar Falls from people who saw everything in terms of profit margins and development potential. That evening, Emma called a meeting with her volunteers. They gathered in her small apartment above the bakery, crowding around her kitchen table to plan their strategy. The group included Sarah Mitchell, Harold Kowalski, and several other residents who had been touched by the library's services. "We need to understand what we're up against," Emma told them. "Mayor Hutchinson has been planning this for months, and he has the support of developers and business owners who see the library as an obstacle to profit." Sarah Mitchell spread out a map of downtown Cedar Falls on the table. "If they convert the library to a hotel, it'll change the entire character of Main Street. Property values will go up, which sounds good, but it'll also price out local businesses that have been here for generations." Harold Kowalski, who had taught civics for 30 years before retiring, offered his perspective on the political situation. "The town council has 7 members, and we need 4 votes to defeat the proposal. I know that Martha Reynolds and David Chen will support the library, but the other 5 are likely to vote with the mayor." Emma felt the weight of the challenge ahead of them. They were fighting not just for the library, but for the kind of community they wanted Cedar Falls to be. It was a battle between preservation and progress, between public service and private profit, between the needs of residents and the desires of developers. As the meeting ended and her volunteers headed home through the snowy streets, Emma stood at her window and looked down at the library building. The streetlights illuminated the snow falling on the building's roof, and she could see the warm glow of the security lights inside. It looked peaceful and permanent, but Emma knew that appearances could be deceiving. She had 1 month to save the library, and she was just beginning to understand how difficult that task would be. The battle lines were drawn by the end of March, and Emma found herself at the center of a community conflict that had split Cedar Falls down the middle. The mayor's supporters, led by local business owners and property developers, argued that the library closure was necessary for economic growth. Emma's coalition, composed primarily of families, elderly residents, and educators, insisted that the library was essential to the community's cultural and intellectual life. Emma's days became consumed with organizing the resistance. She spent her mornings at the library, maintaining normal operations while secretly preparing for the building's potential closure. Her afternoons were devoted to campaign activities, writing letters to state officials, organizing petition drives, and preparing for the town council meeting that would determine the library's fate. The petition campaign was both encouraging and disheartening. Emma and her volunteers collected over 400 signatures from residents who opposed the library closure, but they also encountered significant opposition. Some residents refused to sign, citing the need for economic development and job creation. Others were more direct in their criticism. "That library is a waste of taxpayer money," declared Frank Morrison, owner of Morrison's hardware store, when Emma approached him with the petition. "Nobody reads books anymore. Everything's on the internet now. We need businesses that actually contribute to the local economy." Emma tried to remain diplomatic in these encounters, but she found herself growing frustrated with the narrow-minded focus on immediate economic benefits. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "the library provides internet access to residents who can't afford their own computers. It offers educational programs for children and job search assistance for unemployed workers. These are valuable services that support the entire community." "Listen, Miss Whitmore," Frank replied, "I know you mean well, but you're fighting a losing battle. The mayor has the votes and he has the vision. Cedar Falls needs to modernize or we'll be left behind. Sometimes that means making tough choices." Emma left Morrison's hardware store feeling deflated. She was beginning to understand that her fight was not just about the library. It was about two fundamentally different visions for Cedar Falls' future. The mayor and his supporters saw the town as a commodity to be developed and marketed. Emma and her allies saw it as a community to be preserved and nurtured. The campaign took on a personal dimension when Marjorie Hendricks, the self-appointed social leader who had long criticized Emma's height, began spreading rumors about the librarian's motivations. At the weekly coffee gathering held at Henderson's General Store, Marjorie suggested that Emma was only fighting to save the library to protect her own job. "She's just being selfish," Marjorie told anyone who would listen. "Emma Whitmore has never fit in with this community, and now she's trying to hold back progress to serve her own interests. Maybe if she had found a husband and settled down like a normal woman, she'd understand what's best for families in this town." The rumors reached Emma through Sarah Mitchell, who had overheard Marjorie's comments at the grocery store. "I wanted you to know what people are saying," Sarah told Emma. "Not everyone believes it, but Marjorie has influence with some of the older residents." Emma felt the familiar sting of being judged for her height and her unmarried status. Throughout her life, she had been told that she was too tall, too independent, too different to fit society's expectations. Now those same criticisms were being used to undermine her efforts to save the library. "I've lived with those comments my entire life," Emma told Sarah. "But I won't let them distract me from what's important. The library serves this community, and it deserves to be protected regardless of what people think about me personally." As April progressed, Emma intensified her outreach efforts. She contacted journalists from larger Montana newspapers, hoping to generate media attention that might pressure the town council to reconsider the proposal. She reached out to state legislators, seeking their support for preserving rural library services. She even contacted the Montana Library Association, which issued a statement supporting the Cedar Falls Library and offering legal assistance if needed. The media attention was modest but helpful. A reporter from the Billings Gazette wrote a story about the library closure that was picked up by several other Montana newspapers. The article portrayed Emma as a dedicated librarian, fighting to preserve an essential community service against the forces of unchecked development. Mayor Hutchinson was not pleased with the media coverage. He called Emma to his office for a meeting that she knew would be confrontational. She arrived at City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon, prepared for the worst. The mayor's office was decorated with photographs of local businesses and development projects. Behind his desk hung a large map of Cedar Falls with several properties marked in red, indicating potential development sites. Emma noticed that the library building was prominently marked. "Miss Whitmore," Mayor Hutchinson began, "I'm disappointed that you've chosen to involve outside media in what should be a local matter. This kind of negative publicity is not helpful for our community." "Mr. Mayor," Emma replied, "I've been trying to discuss this issue with you for weeks. Your office has repeatedly refused to schedule a meeting, so I felt I had no choice but to seek support elsewhere. Let's be honest about what's really happening here," the mayor said, leaning back in his chair. "You're fighting to save your job, and you're willing to damage the town's reputation to do it. That's not the kind of leadership we need from our public employees." Emma felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm fighting to save a public service that benefits hundreds of residents. The library is not about me. It's about the community we serve." "The community will be better served by economic development and job creation," the mayor replied. "A boutique hotel will bring in tourists, create employment opportunities, and increase property values. That's real progress, not maintaining an outdated facility that serves a handful of book lovers." The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, with neither side yielding ground. Emma left City Hall feeling more determined than ever to defeat the mayor's proposal, but she also understood that she was running out of time and options. The town council meeting was scheduled for April 15th, just 1 week away. Emma spent the weekend preparing her presentation, gathering statistics about library usage, and organizing her supporters. She also made a difficult decision. She would need to find a way to demonstrate the library's value in terms that the business-minded council members would understand. Working late into Sunday night, Emma compiled data about the library's economic impact on the community. She calculated the value of the services provided, from free internet access to educational programming, and compared it to the cost of operating the facility. She also researched the potential economic benefits of boutique hotels in small towns, finding that many such projects failed to generate the promised revenue and often displaced local businesses. Emma's presentation was thorough and professional, but she knew that facts and figures might not be enough to sway the council members. She needed something more dramatic, something that would capture their attention and make them reconsider their positions. On Monday morning, Emma made a decision that surprised even her closest supporters. She announced that if the town council voted to close the library, she would chain herself to the building and refuse to leave until the decision was reversed. It was a desperate act, but Emma felt that desperate times called for dramatic measures. The announcement generated immediate attention. Local residents gathered at the library to show their support, and several regional news outlets sent reporters to cover the story. Emma found herself at the center of a media storm that she had never expected or wanted. "Are you really prepared to be arrested to save the library?" asked a reporter from the Great Falls Tribune. Emma looked around at the building that had been her professional home for 3 years, surrounded by the books and the community members who had become her extended family. "This library represents everything I believe in about public service and community responsibility," she said. "If protecting it means putting myself at risk, then that's what I'll do." As the week progressed, Emma's story spread beyond Montana. National library organizations began expressing support for her cause, and donations started arriving from librarians and book lovers across the country. The small-town library closure had become a symbol of the broader struggle between corporate development and community preservation. Mayor Hutchinson was furious about the national attention, but Emma sensed that the publicity was also making him nervous. The town council meeting was now being watched by people far beyond Cedar Falls, and the council members would be making their decision under intense scrutiny. Emma spent the final days before the meeting making personal appeals to individual council members. She visited Martha Reynolds, a retired school principal who had always supported the library, and confirmed her vote against the closure. She met with David Chen, a local accountant who understood the value of public services, and secured his support as well. The other 5 council members were less encouraging. 3 of them had already publicly endorsed the mayor's redevelopment plan, and the remaining 2 were undecided. Emma realized that she needed to find a way to change at least one mind, or the library would be lost forever. As Thursday evening approached, Emma felt the weight of the moment. The town council meeting would determine not just the fate of the library, but the future direction of Cedar Falls. It would be a test of whether a small community could resist the pressure of development and preserve the institutions that defined its character. Emma spent the afternoon of April 15th preparing the library for what might be its final day of operation. She straightened the books on the shelves, organized the children's section, and made sure that everything was in perfect order. If this was to be the end, she wanted the library to look its best. As evening fell and residents began gathering at City Hall for the meeting, Emma took one last walk through the building that had been her sanctuary. She touched the oak shelves that had been built by local craftsmen, looked out the windows at the main street she had come to love, and said a silent prayer for the community that had become her home. The battle for the Cedar Falls Public Library was about to reach its climax, and Emma knew that everything she had worked for was on the line. Part 4. The Cedar Falls City Council chambers had never seen a crowd like the one that gathered on the evening of April 15th. Every seat was filled, and dozens of residents stood along the walls and spilled into the hallway. Emma arrived 30 minutes early, carrying a folder full of documents and a presentation that represented weeks of preparation. Her heart pounded as she surveyed the room, recognizing faces from both sides of the conflict. Mayor Hutchinson sat at the head of the council table, flanked by the 7 council members who would decide the library's fate. Emma noticed that Bradley Ashford, the developer who planned to convert the library into a boutique hotel, was seated in the front row with several other men in expensive suits. They looked confident, like people who were accustomed to getting their way. Emma's supporters filled the left side of the room. Sarah Mitchell sat with her 3 children, who held handmade signs reading, "Save our library and books are better than hotels." Harold Kowalski wore his best suit and carried a thick folder of historical documents. Martha Reynolds, the retired school principal and council member, caught Emma's eye and nodded encouragingly. The right side of the room was dominated by Mayor Hutchinson's supporters. Frank Morrison from the hardware store sat with other business owners who favored the redevelopment plan. Marjorie Hendricks occupied a prominent seat, wearing a navy blue dress and a satisfied expression that suggested she expected to witness Emma's defeat. Mayor Hutchinson called the meeting to order at 7 o'clock sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're here tonight to consider Proposal 2024-07, which would relocate the Cedar Falls Public Library to a more suitable facility and allow for the redevelopment of the current building. This is an important decision that will affect our community's future, and I expect everyone to conduct themselves with dignity and respect." The mayor outlined the proposal, emphasizing the economic benefits of converting the library to commercial use. He cited projected increases in property values, potential job creation, and tourism revenue that would result from the boutique hotel development. His presentation was polished and professional, clearly designed to appeal to council members who were concerned about the town's economic future. "This is not a decision we make lightly," Mayor Hutchinson concluded. "But sometimes leadership requires making difficult choices for the greater good. The proposed redevelopment will bring Cedar Falls into the 21st century and provide opportunities for our young people to build careers without leaving town." Emma was called to speak next. She approached the podium with her folder of documents, her height making her visible to everyone in the packed room. She had rehearsed her presentation countless times, but standing before the council with the library's future hanging in the balance, she felt the weight of the moment. "Council members," Emma began, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "I want to talk to you tonight about what we stand to lose if we close the Cedar Falls Public Library. This is not just about books or buildings. It's about the kind of community we want to be." Emma presented her statistics about library usage, demonstrating that the facility served nearly 2% of the town's population on a daily basis. She outlined the services that would be lost: children's programming, computer access for residents without internet, job search assistance, and the historical archives that documented Cedar Falls' heritage. "The proposed new location," Emma continued, "is a windowless storage room with no space for programming, no room for the historical collection, and no accommodation for the thousands of books that currently serve our community. This is not a relocation. It's a closure disguised as a compromise." Emma's presentation was thorough and well-researched, but she could see that several council members were unmoved by her arguments. They had heard these points before, and they seemed more interested in the economic promises made by the mayor and his developer allies. As Emma concluded her formal presentation, she made a decision that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. Instead of returning to her seat, she remained at the podium and spoke from her heart. "I want to tell you something personal," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I've lived in this town for 3 years, and I've heard the whispers about how I don't fit in. I'm too tall, too independent, too different. Some people think I'm fighting to save the library just to protect my job, but that's not true." Emma paused, looking around the room at the faces of her neighbors and colleagues. "I'm fighting to save the library because it's the one place in this town where differences are celebrated instead of criticized. It's where children discover that learning is an adventure, where elderly residents stay connected to the world, and where anyone can find a quiet moment of peace in an increasingly chaotic world." The room was completely silent as Emma continued. "If we close the library to build a hotel, we're sending a message about what we value as a community. We're saying that profit is more important than learning, that development is more important than preservation, and that conformity is more important than diversity." Emma's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "But I believe Cedar Falls is better than that. I believe we're a community that values education and culture, that supports our most vulnerable residents, and that preserves the institutions that make us unique. The library is not just a building. It's a symbol of who we are and who we want to be." As Emma returned to her seat, the room erupted in applause from her supporters. But she also heard boos and jeers from the mayor's allies, and she knew that her emotional appeal might not be enough to change the outcome. The public comment period continued for another hour, with residents from both sides presenting their arguments. Sarah Mitchell spoke about the importance of children's programming. Harold Kowalski read from historical documents that would be lost if the library closed. Frank Morrison argued that the town needed economic development more than it needed books. The most difficult moment came when Marjorie Hendricks approached the podium. She wore a smile that Emma had learned to recognize as dangerous, and her voice dripped with false sympathy. "I want to say something about Miss Whitmore's presentation," Marjorie began. "She's a nice young woman, and I'm sure she means well, but she's not from here. She doesn't understand what Cedar Falls needs to survive and thrive. She's asking us to sacrifice our town's future to preserve her job, and I think that's selfish and misguided." Emma felt her face flush with anger, but she forced herself to remain seated. Marjorie's attack was personal and unfair, but responding would only make the situation worse. "The truth is," Marjorie continued, "Miss Whitmore has never fit into this community. She's too tall, too opinionated, and too stubborn to accept that sometimes change is necessary. Maybe it's time for her to find a place where she belongs instead of trying to hold back progress in Cedar Falls." The room buzzed with murmurs and whispers as Marjorie returned to her seat. Emma felt the familiar sting of being judged for her height and her independence, but she also felt something else, a growing anger at the small-minded prejudice that had shaped so much of her life. After the public comment period ended, the council members began their deliberation. Martha Reynolds spoke first, expressing her strong support for the library and her opposition to the closure. David Chen followed, presenting a detailed analysis of the proposal's financial implications and questioning whether the projected benefits were realistic.